Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. This is the place for senior school leaders to discover innovative ideas and actionable tips that are going to help to strengthen their school's income streams and secure its future. My name's Juliette Corbett, and I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in independent schools. So thanks for joining me today, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this final episode of Series 2 of the Independent School Podcast. I have had so much fun recording this series. I've been speaking to some really wonderful guests along the way. And once again, I've been overwhelmed by the really positive feedback I've had from people. So thank you so much for your support in this venture. So during this series, we've talked about a whole variety of different things, all of them linked to building your independent school's income streams and securing its future financially. So we've recorded some Spark episodes. These are the ones we're taking us a little bit outside of what we normally talk about within independent schools and thinking about things from a slightly different perspective to spark new ideas. So we looked at innovation, social marketing, and then finally leading change. Within the area of bursaries and partnerships, we had a couple of episodes looking at bursary strategy and then an episode looking at community partnerships and fundraising for those. On the strategy side, we also looked at strategic thinking and embedding a culture of strategic thinking in your school. And then finally, we had a couple of episodes on specifically fundraising topics. So feasibility studies, fundraising mindset and moves management. So if any of those sound like they are of interest and you missed them, then if you head over to www.consultjuliette.co.uk/podcast, you'll find all the episodes from this series. So to wrap up this week, I'm going to do something really quite different to what I normally do. We're going much more tactical into the details rather than thinking about big picture strategy. And specifically this week, we're going to be looking at using technology tools so that you can boost your efficiency. Now, this isn't actually an area I expected to be talking about on the podcast or to feel in any way that I had kind of an expert point of view to share with you. But I have been really exploring this area in the last year. So when the pandemic hit, I suddenly had a massive reduction in the amount of time that I had to spend on my business. And I knew I had to get innovating. I had to use efficiency tools in a much more sophisticated way than I had been previously. So I've been innovating for the last year and trying out all sorts of different efficiency tools. And I've been really surprised by the number of people who have asked me for more information about the tools that I'm using. So what I thought I'd do is share with you what I've learned in this last year. And I'm going to introduce to you 5 efficiency tools, technology tools that I really now can't live without. So if your strategy is anything along the lines of boosting efficiency and building in cost savings and getting more out of your time, whilst retaining an authentic engagement with the people that you're working with, both inside your team and outside, then I think these 5 tools could potentially be really useful for you. So I'm going to put the links to all of these on the episode notes for this episode as well. So again, if you head to that website that I just mentioned, you'll be able to see all the links to these tools. Okay, so a really quick roundup of these 5 tools. Number 1, this is a diary management website. It's called Calendly, and it allows me to set up seamlessly meetings with other people. So I set up various different types of meetings in the website. I then send my link to the people that I'm wanting to speak to, and they click on the link and book a meeting directly into my diary. It connects to my calendar so it can see my availability, so people can select a time where I'm available that works for them. It also connects to my Zoom account. So when it sends the notifications, if it's going to be a Zoom meeting, and let's face it, a lot of these meetings are Zoom at the moment, then it automatically sets up a Zoom meeting, Zoom link, and emails it to you and to the other person who's joining you for the meeting. And it sends calendar invites. So it automatically puts it into your calendar and into their calendar. Now, I use this so much, like every day. I save so much time with this particular website. It is well worth the, £10-15 a month it costs me. So it saves you time and it saves other people time, and they really appreciate it. I was a little bit concerned at first that it would seem a little impersonal, a little kind of too corporate almost. But actually people have responded overwhelmingly positively to their experience using Calendly. So within schools, I could definitely see it as streamlining some of the to and fro that you have with people setting up meetings outside your school. So when you're wanting to speak to prospects, I use it when I'm doing feasibility studies for people, for example. When you're setting up meetings with prospective parents, so when you're setting up school visits, be they virtual or eventually real, all of these sorts of things can be set up and made much more pain-free by using a website like Calendly. There are a couple of others, in fact there are many others available. The other really popular one is Acuity. So if you're thinking about exploring this area, then you might want to check out that one as well. The second efficiency tool that I can't live without is Canva. Many of you may have heard of this. It's become increasingly popular in the last couple of years. It is a graphic design website. It has a free plan, but I use the pro plan, and it gives me access to a huge variety of photographs and a really easy to use graphic design platform, all based on their website. It's incredibly powerful for social media images. You can create and then resize them for various different platforms really, really quickly. I use it for producing really powerful PowerPoint presentations, so I often get complimented on the images I use in PowerPoints when I do webinars and things, and that all comes from Canva. It's also really useful for short-ish brochures, so it doesn't replace using a graphic designer, but certainly if you're doing something where something that's good enough is going to be good enough, it doesn't have to be, the fully polished graphic designed version, then Canva could save a huge amount of time and money. And once you get used to it, it's really straightforward to use, even if you don't have any graphic design training. The third technology tool that I couldn't live without is a social media scheduler called SmarterQueue. So I use this for scheduling content on LinkedIn and Twitter, but it also works across Facebook and Instagram as well. And it's particularly good for evergreen content. So evergreen content is the sort of post which could be repeated but with tweaks multiple times. So for example, if you have your alumni magazine go out, you could have, a substantial article in there on climate change and some of the ways your alumni are working on climate change. You could create a whole series of individually crafted posts. So each post looks different, has different text, but each post would link through to that article on your online version of the alumni newsletter on your website. So that would be basically evergreen content. It doesn't date, it doesn't end at any point particularly. So you could have that repeated even potentially, once or twice a month for the next year, potentially with a different slant each time you post it. It's also fantastic for what's called seasonal content. So that's obviously around Christmas and things like that, but also in the build up to big events for your school. So you can set things to repeat up until a certain date and then stop. It's a really powerful social media scheduler. It's quite similar to another one called Meet Edgar. So if you're looking for something that's really good at this evergreen content, then it's worth checking out SmarterQueue and also Meet Edgar. But there are many, many others on the market, many of which have different pros and cons. So it's worth checking out a few different ones. But certainly for me, SmarterQueue, although it's a smaller name than many of those out there, is definitely well suited for what I need. And I think it would suit schools really well as well. Fourthly, on our whistle-stop tour of efficiency tools, this is much more internally focused, and this is a project management tool called Trello. Now, this is really popular, so you've probably heard of this one before. I find it incredibly useful for defining workflow. Now, it's supposed to be, it is incredibly useful for sharing tasks with a whole team, so that you can see that everyone knows when they've got to do something and the deadlines for it, and you can see if it's been done. That's well known. What I found though is that by documenting a process that you have in-house on a board on Trello, it forces you to think through making sure you have an efficient workflow for that project. And actually, I think that is as important as the team communications side of things. So when you set up these boards, you could have different kind of standard boards for any type of project you work on. So alumni events, different fundraising programs, marketing campaigns, all sorts of different things. And you can have a standard board with your standard workflow set up and then just copy it for each time you repeat a similar event or a similar project. It is incredibly powerful, and I certainly recommend that any team that's working, especially they're working mostly remotely at the moment, would benefit from checking out Trello. And then my final efficiency tool, which actually is quite new to me, is called Bonjoro, and it's all about sending video messages. Now, there are other alternatives out there, including Loom, which is another popular one, and this is something I've only just started playing around with, so I'm not sure yet to what extent I'm going to continue with it, but so far I found it to be a really effective way to send messages to people that cut through a lot of the email that people receive. So what you do is you record a short video. It's just literally 30 seconds, so a really short, kind of like a video message version of a voicemail message. You record it quickly and then you send it through the Bonjoro website, and it appears in your recipient's inbox with a little link for them to click to watch your video. It's a really useful way of building a personal connection with people that you don't get to meet that often. So the obvious uses, I think, are for major gifts prospects, so keeping in touch with people between calls, or just sending a message that you'd like to set up a call with them is more likely to be responded to positively if it's a short video message rather than an email. Possibly communicating with prospective families when you're setting up that first couple of touch points where they're doing school tours and so on. To send them a short video message maybe the day after a school tour to say that you'd love to hear their feedback could be a really personal way of doing it. And I know that universities are using it quite a lot within clearing to cut through some of that overwhelm that potential students are feeling at that point, and to try and convert inquiries into applications in clearing. So you could go to the episode notes to find the links for those 5 tools that I find really boost my efficiency. I'm going to give you one little bonus at the end here. Now, I know that podcasts are not a classic way that schools communicate with their audiences at the moment. I think there is some untapped marketing potential in the podcast arena for schools. I know that some schools are using audio interviews and so on for pupils to enhance pupil voice. Could also be used for alumni connection, so interviewing alumni in the similar ways you might do for a newsletter or an event or a webinar. You could well have, a monthly podcast with an interview with an interesting alum, or interviewing staff members and building a sense of thought leadership in an area that your school already really excels in. So I think there's untapped potential. So just really briefly, if you're contemplating moving into the podcast arena, I use Zencastr for recording all of my guest interviews. It's enhanced audio quality over something like Zoom. I use a program called Descript for audio editing, which is an amazing editor where it transcribes the text for you, and you can edit the text and it automatically edits the audio. It's almost like magic. And then finally, to actually distribute my podcast, I use Buzzsprout. And that's a great way of getting it onto all of the standard podcast apps. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, things like that. And as well as using Zencastr, Descript and Buzzsprout for my podcast, I also have the honour of working with Simon Brett and Matt Barber, who help me with all of the audio editing, the social media images, writing the episode notes, uploading everything. I want to say a big shout out to both Simon and Matt for their fantastic help throughout this series. I couldn't have done it without you. So that wraps up series 2 of the podcast. I'm going to be back soon with more, don't worry. In the meantime, I would love to hear your feedback. I'd particularly like to hear about which episodes of this series you found particularly helpful and that you really enjoyed listening to, and the types of subjects you'd like me to cover in the next series. And obviously, if you have any guest suggestions, I'm always really happy to hear those as well. So stay well, look after yourself, and I will see you again soon for the next series of the Independent School Podcast. Bye for now then. So that's it for today, and thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast. If you want to make sure that you don't miss out on future episodes, you can sign up for my newsletter at www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign up. There you can also explore the various ways that I help independent schools to strengthen their income streams and secure their future. Fantastic. See you next time then.